The metallic click of the handcuffs was a sound of finality, a cold, sharp punctuation mark at the end of her dignity. The steel bit into Ilara's wrists, a chilling contrast to the supple warmth of the first-class leather she was being ripped from. "You picked the wrong day to play dress-up, sweetheart." Officer Kincaid's voice was a low growl, thick with cheap coffee and self-satisfaction. He yanked her from the seat, the sudden force making her gasp. Across the cabin, a constellation of smartphones lit up, 50 lenses capturing her humiliation for posterity, for clicks, for the fleeting judgment of strangers. They saw a fraud. They saw a delinquent. They saw a girl who didn't belong. But as Kincaid, a man built like a vending machine, began to drag her toward the open moor of the jet bridge, Ilara Sterling didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply turned her head, her gaze locking onto his with an unnerving calm. "My father is not going to be happy about this." Kincaid let out a short, barking laugh, a laugh that echoed with the certainty of a man who believed he held all the power. He didn't know. He couldn't know that the phone call he'd just forced her to miss wasn't just about a seat. It was about the $3 billion avionics contract her father had just secured for this very model of aircraft. And this flight, Aura Airlines Flight 721 to Seattle, wasn't just being delayed. It was about to be erased from the sky by the man who designed the systems that kept it there. The cabin of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, operated by Aura Airlines, smelled of ozone, recycled air, and the faint, cloying scent of a jasmine-based cleaner meant to evoke luxury. For most, the left turn into the hushed, spacious sanctuary of first class was a life goal. For 19-year-old Ilara Sterling, it was just another leg of a grueling work trip. Lara, as she preferred, adjusted the Bose noise-cancelling headphones over her ears, silencing the chaotic symphony of JFK's tarmac. She was dressed for a 16-hour workday, not a fashion show. An oversized, faded grey hoodie from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where she was taking advanced courses online, was paired with black joggers and a pair of scuffed, steel-toed work boots. Her dark, curly hair was piled into a messy bun secured with a pencil, and her face was bare, save for the faint smudge of industrial lubricant near her temple she'd missed in her haste to leave the workshop. To the casual observer, she looked like a tired student who'd won the lottery. She slid into seat 1A, a private pod that was more of a micro-apartment than a chair. It was her cocoon for the next 5 hours, a space to finalize her presentation. She didn't pull out a novel or a magazine. Instead, from a battered canvas satchel, she retrieved a company-issued tablet and a sheaf of technical blueprints, the crisp paper crinkling in the quiet cabin. She was ready to lose herself in the intricate dance of gyroscopic stabilizers and fly-by-wire systems. The piece lasted precisely 3 minutes. "Excuse me. I believe you've made a mistake." The voice was sharp, polished to a weaponized edge, and dripping with the kind of condescension that could curdle milk. Lara didn't look up. She was deep in the schematics of a new landing gear actuator, her brow furrowed in concentration. She assumed the comment was directed at a flight attendant. A sharp rap on the shell of her pod, like a woodpecker with an attitude, broke her focus. A perfectly manicured hand, each nail a blood-red almond, was the source of the noise. On one finger sat a diamond that looked heavy enough to be a navigational hazard. "Young lady, I am speaking to you. You are in my seat." Lara slowly lowered her headphones, letting them rest around her neck. She looked up. Standing in the aisle was a woman who seemed to have been sculpted from privilege and disdain. She was in her late 50s, encased in a cream-colored St. John knit suit that probably had its own mortgage. A pearl necklace, thick as a rope, was coiled at her throat, and she clutched a pristine Hermes Kelly bag. Her silver blonde hair was coiffed into a rigid, unmoving helmet. Her face was a mask of pinched disbelief. "Can I help you, Mum?" Lara's voice was even, betraying none of the weariness she felt. "You can help by taking your things and moving to the back of the plane where you obviously belong," the woman snapped. Her voice was loud enough to make the venture capitalist in Tube B peer over his Wall Street Journal. "This is first class, and this," she gestured to Lara's pod, as if it were contaminated, "is seat 1A. My seat." Lara blinked. She calmly reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out her phone, bringing up the digital boarding pass. She double-checked the information. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but my boarding pass clearly says 1A. Perhaps you're in 1C." The woman, whose name was Meredith Covington, a name synonymous with hostile takeovers and ostentatious charity galas, let out a sound that was half gasp, half scoff. She turned to the passengers now, openly watching the drama unfold, playing to her audience. "Did you hear that? She thinks she has a ticket. The airline system must have been hacked. It's the only explanation." Meredith's cold eyes swiveled back to Lara. "Listen to me, little girl. My husband is an Aura Airlines Apex Diamond member. We have flown in this row for 15 years. I don't know what affirmative action program or social media contest allowed you to slip through the cracks, but I will not spend 5 hours flying to Seattle looking at the back of a galley wall while you and your grunge defile this seat." Lara's jaw tightened. She'd met women like Meredith Covington her entire life. They populated the boardrooms and country clubs her father moved through. Being the daughter of Marcus Sterling, the founder and CEO of Orion Aerospace, meant she was fluent in the coded language of the ultra-wealthy. It also meant she knew their vulnerabilities. "I paid for my ticket with my own money," Lara said, her voice dropping a notch, becoming cooler, more precise. It was a point of pride for her. She used the salary from her internship at Orion. "I suggest you check your own boarding pass again. The system is quite reliable." "I am never in 1C," Meredith shrieked, the veneer of aristocratic calm cracking. She began stabbing the flight attendant call button with a vindictive fury, as if trying to personally injure the aircraft. Lara sighed and slid her headphones back over her ears. She turned back to her blueprints. She wasn't moving. She knew the rules. She knew the contract of carriage by heart. It was part of her intern training. She held the legal high ground, or so she believed. A harried-looking flight attendant named Chloe hurried down the aisle. She wore a smile so forced it looked painful. She immediately recognized Meredith Covington, and her expression shifted to one of fawning deference. "Mrs. Covington, so wonderful to have you with us again," Chloe gushed, her voice a nervous flutter. "Is everything all right? Can I get you a pre-departure glass of champagne?" "What's not all right?" Meredith hissed, pointing a trembling red-tipped finger at Lara. "Is that this person is in my seat and is refusing to acknowledge her error." Chloe's gaze shifted to Lara. The practiced smile faltered. She took in the MIT hoodie, the work boots, the smudged face. Then she looked back at Meredith's designer suit and pearls. A quick, silent calculation of net worth and potential for trouble occurred in her mind. It was a bias as old as air travel itself. Power wore St. John, not cotton fleece. "Miss," Chloe leaned over the pod, her voice taking on a patronizing sweetness. "Could I please see your boarding pass?" Lara held up her phone again. "It's 1A. My name is Ilara Sterling." Chloe took the phone, her eyes scanning the screen. It looked legitimate. She pulled out her handheld device and scanned the QR code. It beeped green. Valid. But Meredith was looming over her, a storm cloud of Chanel No. 5 and righteous fury. "It's a forgery," Meredith insisted, her voice rising. Or she stole someone's identity. Look at her. Does she look like someone who can afford a $12,000 ticket? She's probably smuggling something. If you don't remove her this instant, I will have your job. I will call Arthur, and he will call the CEO. You'll be fired before we land." The threat of a call from Arthur Covington, the notoriously ruthless CEO of Covington Dynamics, made Chloe visibly pale. She looked back at Lara, her decision made. "Miss, it seems there's been a system glitch," she said, her voice now firm. "Mrs. Covington is one of our most valued clients. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings." "And go where?" Lara asked, not moving an inch. "We have a lovely seat available in Economy Plus," Chloe offered, as if it were a grand prize. "We can refund you the fare difference, of course." Lara's gaze was steady. "I don't want a refund. I want the seat I purchased. Federal Aviation Administration regulations are clear. In the case of a duplicate booking, the passenger who is boarded and seated has precedence. The other passenger is to be offered compensation to be rebooked or to take a different seat. You do not deplane a seated passenger unless they are a security risk." "Don't you dare quote regulations to me, you insolent child!" Meredith screeched. "Ma'am, please," Chloe pleaded, turning to Lara. "You're causing a scene. We can't delay the entire flight because of this. If you would just cooperate." "No," Lara said, her voice like ice. "I purchased this seat. I am an engineer flying to Seattle for a critical aerospace conference. I need this space to work. I am staying in this seat." Chloe straightened up, her face hardening. Her patience, already thin, snapped. The pilot was on the radio, demanding to know why the cabin wasn't secure for pushback. "Miss, if you do not comply with the instructions of the flight crew, you are committing a federal offense. I am now instructing you to vacate this seat, and I am informing you that your instruction is based on prejudice, not policy," Lara countered, her heart finally beginning to hammer against her ribs. Meredith smirked, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "Call security. Get her off this plane, now." Chloe gave a sharp nod to Meredith, a silent promise. "I'll be right back." Lara watched the flight attendant march toward the cockpit. She pulled out her phone again. The signal was fading as the ground crew prepared to close the main cabin door. She scrolled to the contact simply labeled Dad. She paused. He was in the middle of closing the Avalon deal, the biggest in the company's history. He'd told her not to call unless the building was on fire. She was 19. She was supposed to be able to handle herself. She didn't want to be the CEO's daughter who needed Daddy to fight her battles. But then she looked up. She saw the other passengers staring, whispering. The venture capitalist in 2B was now openly filming. They weren't on her side. They were waiting for the show. They were waiting for the imposter to be cast out. She put the phone back in her pocket. "Not yet," she thought. "I'll give them one last chance to be reasonable." 10 minutes stretched into an eternity. The air in the cabin grew thick and stale. The captain's voice finally crackled over the PA system, clipped and annoyed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently holding at the gate due to a passenger compliance issue. We apologize for the delay and hope to have it resolved shortly." Meredith Covington stood in the aisle the entire time, arms crossed, glaring at Lara like a predator waiting for its prey to be cornered. Then, the sound of heavy, authoritative footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority police officers entered the aircraft. The one in the lead was Officer Kincaid. He was a large man, his uniform stretched tight across a barrel chest and a burgeoning gut. He had a military-style buzz cut and a face that looked permanently soured on the world. Chloe pointed a trembling finger. "That's her. She's refusing to deplane." Kincaid didn't ask for Lara's side of the story. He didn't ask to see her ticket. He saw a young black woman in a hoodie and work boots sitting in a seat that cost more than he made in 2 months. He saw a wealthy, impeccably dressed white woman standing beside her, radiating indignation. He made his judgment before he'd even taken 3 steps into the cabin. He marched up to Lara's pod. "All right, show's over, let's go." Lara looked up at him, a knot of genuine fear tightening in her stomach. "Officer, I have a valid ticket. I haven't done anything wrong." "You're creating a disturbance," Kincaid said, his voice flat and bored. His hand rested on his belt near his handcuffs. "The airline wants you off their property. That means you get off. Now." "I have a legally binding contract of carriage," Lara argued, her voice shaking slightly, despite her efforts to keep it steady. "I have not violated any safety protocols. They are removing me because this woman demanded my seat based on my appearance. This is discriminatory." "I don't care about the why," Kincaid barked, leaning in, his presence overwhelming her small space. "The flight crew gives an order. You follow it. End of story. You are now delaying a commercial flight. That's a serious offense. So what's it going to be? A walk of shame or a ride in the back of my car?" "Arrest her," Meredith chimed in, her face alight with vicious glee. "She's probably got a fake ID, too." "I'm not moving," Lara said, her hands gripping the armrests. "What you are doing is illegal." Kincaid's face flushed a deep, mottled red. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially not by someone he had already categorized as a nobody. "Last chance. Get up and walk off this plane, or I will remove you by force." "I'm calling my father," Lara said, her hand moving toward her pocket. It was the wrong move. Kincaid lunged. He wasn't gentle. He grabbed Lara's wrist, twisting it with practiced, painful efficiency. Her phone slipped from her grasp and clattered onto the plush carpet. "Ow! You're hurting me!" she cried out, the shock and pain overriding her composure. "She's resisting!" Kincaid shouted, for the benefit of the rolling cameras. He hauled her out of the seat with a single, brutal motion. Lara was strong, but Kincaid had the advantage of weight and leverage. He pulled her into the aisle as if she were a sack of potatoes. "Hey, stop that!" a man in row 4 shouted. "The kid didn't do anything." "Stay out of it," Kincaid's partner warned, his hand moving toward his own sidearm, effectively silencing any further protests. Lara stumbled, her boots catching on the carpet. "Let go of me. You have no right." "I've got all the right I need," Kincaid growled, spinning her around and shoving her hard against the galley wall. The impact knocked the wind out of her. He kicked her legs apart into a wide, humiliating stance. "Just taking out the trash." He fumbled for his handcuffs. The cold metal brushed against her skin. "Please," Lara gasped, her cheek pressed against the cool plastic of the wall. Just let me make one phone call. Please." Kincaid laughed, a dry, cruel sound. "You get your phone call from a holding cell, princess." He wrenched her arm back to secure the second cuff. In that moment, as the steel was about to lock, Lara stopped struggling. Her body went still, her breathing evened out. The panic in her eyes was replaced by a chilling, focused calm. "Officer Kincaid," she said, her voice quiet but carrying an eerie authority. "My father is Marcus Sterling. You are assaulting the daughter of the man who designed and manufactured the primary flight control system for this aircraft." Kincaid paused for a fraction of a second, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Then he scoffed, dismissing it as a desperate lie. "Yeah, right. And I'm the Queen of England." Click. The second handcuff locked into place. "Get her off my plane," Meredith Covington said with a triumphant sniff. She gracefully stepped over Lara's fallen blueprints as she settled into seat 1A, fluffing the pillow behind her back with a sigh of deep satisfaction. Kincaid shoved Lara forward, out of the climate-controlled cabin, and into the cold, indifferent reality of the jet bridge. The walk from Gate C42 to the Port Authority substation in Terminal 5 was a modern-day perp walk, engineered for maximum humiliation. Officer Kincaid paraded her through the bustling terminal, his grip on her upper arm a vice of unnecessary force. He seemed to feed on the stares, the whispers, the pointed fingers. Lara kept her head held high, a solitary island of defiance in a sea of judgment. The burning in her wrists was a dull ache compared to the hot shame coiling in her gut. As they passed a crowded food court, the murmurs swelled. "Look at that. Wonder what she did. She's just a kid. Why are they so rough with her?" Then the second wave of phones came out. Not just the passengers from the flight, but a whole new audience. A teenager live streaming to his friends, a tourist filming for a vacation video, 100 black rectangles, all pointed at her. "You're hurting her," a woman yelled from a Starbucks line. "Police business! Clear a path!" Kincaid shouted back, shoving a man who got too close. Lara met the gaze of a young woman holding an iPhone, her face a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Lara didn't look away. She spoke directly to the lens, her voice clear and strong. "My name is Elara Sterling. I am being arrested because a woman wanted my first-class seat." Kincaid jerked her forward violently. "I said, shut your mouth. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." But the message was out. The video, tagged Nostro Ora Airlines and Horzosta JFK arrest, was uploaded before they reached the end of the concourse. By the time Kincaid pushed her through the heavy steel door of the police substation, it had 10,000 views. By the time he chained her to a metal table in a bleak, windowless interrogation room, it had 100,000. The substation smelled of burnt coffee, ammonia, and quiet desperation. It was a universe away from the perfumed air of the 787. "Make yourself at home, Your Highness," Kincaid sneered, dropping into the chair opposite her. He started typing her arrest report with 2 thick fingers. "Name?" "I've already told you," Lara said, rubbing her raw wrist. "Elara Sterling. Address? 1 Orion Plaza, Manhattan." Kincaid stopped typing. He looked up, a derisive smirk twisting his lips. 1 Orion Plaza, the headquarters of Orion Aerospace. Cute. You live in an office building now? Let's try for some honesty. A housing project in the Bronx? A shelter in Queens? "My identification is in my satchel, which you confiscated," Lara said, her patience worn to a thread. Kincaid grabbed the canvas bag and unceremoniously dumped its contents onto the metal table. Out spilled her tablet, a pair of safety goggles, a high-end digital caliper, a well-worn leather wallet, and a set of keys. The key fob was a heavy, machined piece of titanium, laser-etched with the Orion Aerospace logo. Kincaid's smirk faltered. He picked up the wallet. It was simple, unadorned, but the leather was impossibly soft. He flipped it open and pulled out her driver's license. Elara Sterling. Address: 1 Orion Plaza, PHA, New York, NY. His eyes widened slightly. He dug deeper and pulled out a credit card. It wasn't plastic. It was a dark, matte black titanium card issued by a private bank that catered exclusively to the 9-figure net worth club. His chewing gum slowed to a halt. He looked from the card to the girl in the hoodie. "Stolen," he muttered, more to convince himself than her. "Has to be stolen." "Run the numbers," Lara challenged him, her voice ringing with confidence. "Check my name. Check my company ID. Do your job, Officer Kincaid." The door to the interrogation room burst open. A sergeant, a weary-looking man with salt and pepper hair named Diaz, stormed in. He was holding a tablet, and his face was the color of ash. "Kincaid! What in the goddamn hell did you do? Diaz barked, his voice a panicked roar. Just processing a disorderly conduct charge, Sarge. Trespassing. Resisting. Suspect is uncooperative. Probably has a sheet a mile long. Diaz marched to the table and stared at Lara. He glanced at the live-streaming video on his tablet, then back at Kincaid, his eyes wide with terror. Uncooperative. Kincaid, you monumental idiot. The entire internet is on fire. Do you have any idea who she is? Some punk kid who wouldn't give up her seat. She's Marcus Sterling's daughter, Diaz bellowed, slamming the tablet down on the table. Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Orion Aerospace, the guy with a direct line to the mayor and half of Congress, the guy whose company is the largest private employer in this state. Kincaid froze. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly pallor. He looked at the black card in his hand. He looked at the Orion key fob. He looked at the girl. She didn't look... Didn't look like what? Lara's voice cut through the room like a shard of glass. Didn't look like I belonged? Diaz spun toward Lara, his entire demeanor shifting from rage to desperate, groveling apology. Miss Sterling, I am profoundly sorry. There has been a catastrophic misunderstanding. Please let me get these cuffs off you immediately. Don't you touch me, Lara snapped, yanking her hand away. I want my phone call. I want to call my father. Right now. Diaz glared at Kincaid. Give her the phone. And then you'd better start praying, Kincaid. Pray that Marcus Sterling is a forgiving man. But as Kincaid fumbled to retrieve Lara's phone, a special landline on Diaz's desk began to ring. It was a red phone, a direct line from the airport commissioner's office, a phone that hadn't rung in 3 years. Diaz snatched it up. Sergeant Diaz. He listened, his posture becoming ramrod straight. Yes, Commissioner. She's right here. Yes, sir. We are beginning to understand the full scope of the situation. His eyes darted to Lara. He swallowed hard. He's on the line for her now? Yes, sir. I'll put him through. He held the receiver out to Lara. It's for you. Lara took the phone. Hello? Lara. The voice on the other end was deep, impossibly calm, and vibrating with a controlled fury that could power a city. It was the voice that silenced boardrooms and made world leaders listen. Are you hurt? I'm okay, Dad. My wrist is bruised. They cuffed me. A silence stretched over the line, heavier and more terrifying than any shouting could ever be. Stay right there, Marcus Sterling said. I'm 5 minutes out. And Lara? Yes, Dad? Watch the tarmac. Aboard Aura 721, the atmosphere was one of smug relief. The problem had been removed. The flight attendants were now moving through the first-class cabin with apologetic smiles and bottles of Dom Perignon. Meredith Covington was fully reclined in seat 1A, the throne she had rightfully conquered. She'd posted a selfie to her Instagram, champagne flute held high. The caption, "Finally some order. Unruly elements removed. Off to Seattle. First-class life. Know your place." The plane finally pushed back from the gate. The safety video played. The massive Rolls-Royce Trent engines spooled up, a deep, powerful hum that vibrated through the very soul of the aircraft. Meredith closed her eyes, imagining the satisfying roar of takeoff. The 787 taxied toward the active runway. They were second in line for departure. She felt the plane make the final turn, aligning itself with the long stretch of concrete. And then, nothing. The engines didn't roar. They whined down. The powerful hum faded to a whisper. The air conditioning faltered. The entire 200-ton aircraft shuddered to a dead stop on the taxiway. A murmur of confusion rippled through the cabin. Meredith's eyes snapped open. Oh, for heaven's sake, what now? The captain's voice came over the intercom. It sounded completely different. All the previous annoyance was gone, replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have just received a direct order from the FAA control tower. We are to hold our position. I don't have any further information at this time. Please remain seated." In the cockpit, Captain Harris was staring at his console in disbelief. It wasn't just an order from the tower. It was an order being relayed from the National Airspace System Command Center, on the authority of a voice he'd only heard in press conferences. "Tower, say again the reason for the ground stop on Aura 721, Harris demanded. "Aura 721, be advised, your flight certification for this specific airframe, tail number N787AU, has been provisionally revoked." The controller's voice was tense. "Repeat, your airworthiness certificate is suspended, effective immediately. You are ordered to return to the gate. Do not attempt takeoff under any circumstances." "Revoked? On what grounds? This plane just came out of a full-service check." A new voice cut in, bypassing the controller. It was the icy, authoritative voice of Aura Airlines' Chief of Operations. "Harris, turn the plane around, now." "Sir, what is going on?" "The owner of the aircraft has just invoked the emergency reclamation clause in our lease agreement," the COO said, his voice strained. "He's claiming a material breach of contract due to reputational endangerment to his asset. Effectively, Harris, if you move that plane one more inch toward that runway, you're flying a stolen aircraft." Harris felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He looked at his first officer. "The owner? Who the hell owns this plane? I thought we did." The first officer was frantically swiping through documents on his iPad. His face went white. "No, sir. We lease our entire Olvus 87 fleet from Orion Aerospace Leasing." Harris's blood ran cold. Orion. Marcus Sterling. Back in the cabin, the lights flickered and died, switching to emergency power. The plane began a slow, lumbering, deeply shameful U-turn on the taxiway. Meredith slammed her empty champagne flute down. "This is utterly ridiculous. Stewardess, why are we going back?" Chloe, the flight attendant, approached row 1. Her face was ashen. She had just gotten off the phone with the purser. She was no longer smiling. "Mrs. Covington," Chloe said, her voice a trembling whisper. "The flight has been cancelled." "Cancelled? Why?" "Because," Chloe whispered, her eyes darting to the empty space where Lara had been sitting. "The man who owns the plane is angry." The Port Authority substation had transformed from a drab office into the command center of a crisis. Officer Kincaid sat slumped in a corner, his career flashing before his eyes. Sergeant Diaz was pacing like a caged animal. Lara sat in a chair, the cuffs removed, holding a bag of ice to her wrist that Diaz had practically sprinted to get for her. The heavy steel doors to the station didn't just open, they were flung open with such force that one slammed into the wall, cracking the plaster. 4 men in dark, severe suits entered first, moving with the fluid, synchronized precision of a Special Forces team. They were Marcus Sterling's personal security detail. They fanned out, securing the room in under 3 seconds, their cold eyes completely ignoring the uniformed police officers. Then, Marcus Sterling walked in. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal grey suit so perfectly tailored it seemed to have been woven onto him. He didn't look like an angry father. He looked like a force of nature given human form. His eyes, the same intelligent, intense grey as his daughter's, swept the room and locked onto Lara. "Dad." Lara stood up, a wave of relief so powerful it made her dizzy, washing over her. Marcus crossed the room in 3 long strides and enveloped her in a hug. He held her for a moment, then pulled back, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching for any sign of injury. He gently took her hand, his thumb tracing the red, angry marks on her wrist. His jaw tightened, a single muscle twitching in his cheek. He turned slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Who? It was one word, spoken softly, yet it carried the weight of a death sentence. Sergeant Diaz stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Mr. Sterling, I'm Sergeant Diaz. I was not on duty when this occurred, but I take full responsibility for the actions of my—" "I didn't ask for your name," Marcus interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "I asked, who?" Lara's gaze shifted to the corner. "Officer Kincaid." Marcus's head turned, his eyes pinning Kincaid to the wall. The officer struggled to his feet, trying to summon a shred of his former authority. "Sir, I was just doing my job. She was creating a disturbance. Protocol." "Protocol," Marcus repeated, the word tasting like poison. He walked toward Kincaid, his security team shifting subtly, ready to intercept. He stopped 2 feet from the terrified officer. "You put a 19-year-old girl in handcuffs because an entitled woman coveted her seat. You physically assaulted her. You paraded her through a public space to humiliate her. You call that protocol?" She was resisting," Kincaid stammered. "My legal team is, as we speak, filing a $50 million civil rights lawsuit against the Port Authority, the NYPD, and you personally, Officer Kincaid," Marcus said, his voice a placid sea of menace. "But lawsuits take time. I find I'm not a patient man when it comes to consequences." Marcus pulled out his phone. He dialed a number and put it on speaker. "Commissioner," Marcus said. The police commissioner's voice, tinny and panicked, filled the room. "Marcus, I am horrified. I've seen the video. There are no words. It's indefensible." "I want his badge," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Kincaid's. "Not a suspension, not a desk reassignment. I want him fired. I want his pension stripped, and I want the district attorney to press assault charges. If those things haven't happened by the time I walk out of this room, Orion Aerospace's multi-million-dollar donation to the new police training facility is rescinded, and I will personally fund the campaign of any candidate who runs against the mayor in the next election." There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. "Put Kincaid on." Marcus held the phone out. Kincaid's hand was shaking so badly he could barely take it. "Key, Commissioner," Kincaid squeaked. "You're finished, Kincaid," the voice barked. "Hand your weapon and your badge to Sergeant Diaz. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Get out of my building." The line went dead. Kincaid dropped the phone as if it were red hot. He stared at Marcus, then at Lara. His face was a mask of utter ruin. He numbly unclipped his badge from his uniform and placed it on the desk. He unholstered his weapon and set it beside the badge. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the station, a man whose life had just been dismantled in under 60 seconds. Marcus turned to Diaz. "Now, the woman who started this. Meredith Covington. Where is she?" "Sir, the plane is returning to gate C-42 as we speak," Diaz said, quickly, eager to be helpful. Marcus adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. "Come on, Lara. Let's go meet your flight." "But Dad," Lara said, confused. "The flight is cancelled." Marcus smiled, but it was a cold, predatory expression that didn't reach his eyes. "The flight is cancelled for them. We have a plane to catch. But first, I have some trash of my own to take out." Gate C-42 was a maelstrom of chaos and fury. The unexpected return of Flight 721 had sent shockwaves through the terminal. But the cacophony died the instant Marcus Sterling, flanked by his security and with Lara at his side, swept into the gate area. They didn't wait in line. They walked straight behind the service desk. The lead gate agent, a man named Dave, started to protest. "Sir, this is The jet bridge groaned as it reconnected, a sound of reluctant surrender. The plane door hissed open. A wave of stale, frustrated air washed into the gate area, followed by Meredith Covington. She was a tempest in a St. John suit, her face a mask of thunderous indignation, ready to unleash hell upon the nearest representative of the airline that had dared to inconvenience her. "This is an outrage, an absolute abomination of customer service," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the suddenly silent terminal. She jabbed a crimson-nailed finger at the stunned gate agent. "Dave, I will have your jobs. I will have this entire airline dismantled. I want to know who is responsible for this." The pilot mumbled something about the owner grounding the plane. "Who is this imbecile? Does he have any concept of who my husband is?" "That would be me," a voice answered, not with a roar, but with the deep, resonant calm of an ocean trench. It cut through her tirade like a surgeon's scalpel. "And for the record, no. I don't particularly care." Meredith spun around. Her fury faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. There stood Marcus Sterling, an immovable object in bespoke charcoal grey, and beside him, her hand gently cradling an ice pack against her wrist, was the girl. The delinquent. The fraud. The source of all this. Meredith's mind, a finely tuned machine for calculating social hierarchies, sputtered and failed. It could not compute this image. "You?" she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Marcus. "Who are you? Her public defender?" A low murmur rippled through the disembarking passengers. The constellation of smartphones, which had never truly been lowered, rose again, hungry for the second act. "I am her father," Marcus said, his voice dropping, yet somehow carrying to every corner of the crowded space. He took a single, deliberate step forward, and the crowd instinctively parted for him. "And I am the man who holds the title to every circuit board, every turbine blade, and every single titanium rivet on the aircraft you just defiled with your prejudice." Meredith's laugh was a brittle, ugly thing. "Don't be absurd. That girl is a common criminal. She was a threat. She was arrested for causing a disturbance." "She was assaulted," Marcus corrected, his voice hardening to the temper of steel. "She was humiliated. She was falsely arrested because you, Mrs. Covington, saw a young black woman in a hoodie and decided she was a stain on your first-class experience. You couldn't fathom a world where she belonged, and you didn't. So you manufactured a crime. You weaponized your privilege, your age, and your skin color to abuse the system and summon men with guns to remove a 19-year-old girl who had done nothing but sit in the seat she paid for. She looked out of place," Meredith insisted, her gaze darting wildly, searching for an ally in the sea of faces and finding only mirrors reflecting her own ugliness. It was Alara who spoke then, stepping out from behind her father's protective shadow. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and sharp, forged in the quiet intensity of labs and workshops. "I looked like an engineer," she said, meeting Meredith's frantic gaze with an unnerving calm. "I looked like someone who had been working for 16 hours on the final stress test simulations for the new composite wing assembly being developed for this very airframe. I looked like someone who understands the physics that keep 200 tons of metal in the sky, a concept you seem to find less important than your seating preference." The words landed like stones in a silent pool. Meredith paled. This wasn't the script she had written. Marcus placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder, a gesture of both protection and pride. He turned his attention back to Meredith, his expression one of cold, academic curiosity. "Your husband is Arthur Covington, CEO of Covington Dynamics, correct?" "What does my husband have to do with this?" Meredith snapped, a note of real fear creeping into her voice. Everything, Marcus stated. Covington Dynamics is pinning its future on the new Hyperion engine project. A magnificent piece of technology, I'm told. But it has a fatal dependency. Its high-pressure turbine blades require a specific, patented, cobalt-titanium alloy to withstand the extreme temperatures. An alloy with a singular global supplier. He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the implications suffocate the air around her. My company, Orion Aerospace. The carefully constructed mask of Meredith Covington's face began to crack and splinter. You wouldn't dare. Dare? Marcus's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, meant only for her, but overheard by the closest smartphones. Mrs. Covington, my legal team has already been in touch with your husband's board. Our supply contract contains a standard, if rarely used, moral turpitude clause. It stipulates that any public action by a key representative that brings disrepute upon our shared business interests constitutes a material breach. Your actions today, broadcast globally, have more than met that standard. The contract is terminated, effective an hour ago. Arthur will have a fascinating time on Monday explaining to his shareholders why his multi-billion-dollar flagship project is now a collection of very expensive paperweights. Meredith staggered back, her hand flying to her throat as if to stop the words from choking her. This wasn't a cancelled flight. This wasn't a lawsuit. This was annihilation. This was the swift, merciless demolition of her entire world, of the very foundation of her power. You're destroying his life's work because of a seat, she whispered, her voice a ragged, disbelieving rasp. Marcus leaned in, his eyes like chips of obsidian. No, I'm not doing this because of a seat. I'm doing this because you laid your hands on my daughter. Because you saw her brilliance and chose to see a threat. Because you tried to break her spirit. You assumed she was just a girl in a hoodie. You never stopped to consider that she might have built the world you're standing on. You are not being punished. You are experiencing the consequences of your own choices. At that moment, Chloe, the flight attendant, and the rest of the cabin crew emerged, their faces pale with a terror that went far beyond professional reprimand. Marcus straightened, his gaze falling upon the young woman. And you must be Chloe. She flinched as if struck. Mr. Sterling, sir, I am so sorry. I was just trying to de-escalate the situation. Mrs. Covington is a Diamond Apex member. She was insistent. You weren't de-escalating. You were capitulating, Marcus said, his voice devoid of heat, which was somehow more terrifying. You abdicated your responsibility. You saw a bully and a victim, and you chose to help the bully because it was the easier path. You failed to follow your own airline's protocol. You failed to uphold federal regulations. And most importantly, you failed a child who was under your care. The CEO of Aura Airlines has already personally assured me your employment, along with that of the captain who failed to intervene, has been terminated. I trust you'll find your next career offers less opportunity for moral cowardice. He turned his back on them, a final, dismissive gesture. He faced the hundreds of passengers, his entire demeanor shifting from that of an executioner to a gracious host. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice projected across the gate, warm and commanding. On behalf of Orion Aerospace, I offer my deepest apologies for this unacceptable disruption. The actions of a few individuals should not tarnish your travel plans. This specific aircraft is, for now, a crime scene, and will remain grounded. However, he raised a hand, preempting the collective groan of despair. My staff is, as we speak, processing a full refund and an additional $5,000 compensation voucher for every passenger on this flight. For those who require it, First-class hotel accommodations and meal stipends for the night have been arranged. A stunned silence fell over the gate, which was then shattered by a wave of gasps, and then a spontaneous, roaring ovation. As for those ticketed in the first-class cabin, Marcus continued, gesturing towards the vast window overlooking the tarmac. Silently, like a silver ghost, a Gulfstream G700 was pulling up to the adjacent gate, its engines whispering. A replacement aircraft is waiting to take you to Seattle. Departure will be in 45 minutes. The bar, I'm told, is already open. The applause redoubled. Marcus let it wash over the room for a moment before delivering his final judgment, his eyes finding the solitary, ostracized figure of Meredith Covington, who now stood alone, a pariah in her own kingdom. "Every one of you will be taken care of," Marcus concluded, his voice softening but carrying with lethal clarity. "Except for you, Mrs. Covington. You are now on the permanent no-fly list for this airline and all of its global partners. As for your journey to Seattle, I believe the Port Authority bus terminal is on 42nd Street. I'm sure you'll find it." He placed a gentle hand on Ilara's back. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go." They walked away, not toward the waiting Gulfstream, but toward a private exit. They moved past the cheering passengers, past the shattered remnants of Chloe's career, and past the weeping, broken figure of Meredith Covington, whose phone was now buzzing with a frantic, incessant rhythm, a call from a husband whose world she had just incinerated. They didn't go straight to the G700. Marcus led Ilara to a quiet, private lounge tucked away behind an unmarked door, a sterile sanctuary of frosted glass and brushed steel reserved for emergencies and visiting dignitaries. The roar of the terminal faded to a distant hum. For the first time since she'd stepped onto the plane, there were no eyes on her, no cameras, no judgment, no whispers. The silence was overwhelming. And in that silence, the adrenaline that had held her together finally receded, leaving behind a cold, trembling exhaustion. Her knees felt weak. She sank into a minimalist leather armchair, the ice pack slipping from her numb fingers and clattering onto the polished concrete floor. She stared at her wrist. The red marks from the handcuffs were already beginning to bloom into a dark, ugly purple. It wasn't just a bruise. It was a brand, a physical record of her humiliation. Marcus sat opposite her, his powerful frame seeming to shrink as the CEO persona dissolved, leaving only a father, his face etched with a pain and fury that was far deeper than anything he had shown outside. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and raw. She shook her head, not in answer to his question, but in an attempt to clear the fog from her mind. "He didn't even ask," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. "The flight attendant, the officer, they didn't look at my ticket. They didn't listen to a word I said. They just looked at me, and they saw a problem that needed to be removed. In their world, I couldn't possibly belong there. It was an error in the system, and the easiest way to fix the error was to delete me." A tear she hadn't realized was forming traced a hot path down her cheek. "When he put the cuffs on me, Dad, for a second, I believed him. I believed I had done something wrong. That's what was so terrifying. He had the uniform, the authority, and the whole world was watching, and they believed him too." Marcus reached across the space between them and enclosed her hands in his. His own were trembling slightly. "When I saw that video, Lara, when I saw his hands on you, I felt a rage I haven't felt since your mother died. Everything I did out there, ruining Covington, firing that crew, it wasn't enough. It felt like trying to put out a forest fire with a glass of water. It punishes the arsonists, but the forest is still burning." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a terrible, helpless guilt. "This is my fault. I've spent your whole life teaching you to be brilliant, to be independent, to stand on your own 2 feet. I pushed you to take this trip by yourself, to use your own salary, to prove you weren't just the CEO's daughter. I wanted you to build your own strength. I never imagined the world would try to punish you for it." "It's not your fault," Elara said, her voice gaining a sliver of its former strength. "You taught me to be an engineer, to solve problems, and what I saw today, it's a systems problem." She took a deep breath, her mind beginning to click and whir, moving past the trauma and into analysis, her natural state. "What you did out there, it was magnificent. It was justice. But it was your justice. It was the justice of a king. You wielded your power and you smote your enemies. And it worked, because you're Marcus Sterling. But what happens tomorrow to the girl who looks like me, who is just as brilliant, but whose father isn't a billionaire CEO, who smites her enemies, who rebalances her scales?" Marcus stared at her, a dawning realization in his eyes. He had come to rescue his daughter, but in the process, she had become something more. "Your solution was elegant, Dad. A brute force solution. Overwhelm the opposing force with superior power. But it's not a scalable solution," she continued, the language of the workshop now framing her worldview. "You didn't fix the flaw in the system. You just created a temporary, localized exception for me. The system itself, the bias in the airline's training, the prejudice in that officer's head, the entitlement of people like Meredith, it's all still there, ready for the next passenger." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with a fierce, burgeoning clarity. "Don't just terminate the Covington Dynamics contract. That's an ending. I want a beginning. Use it as leverage. I don't want Arthur Covington fired. I want him on his knees. I want him to publicly apologize. And I want his company to endow a $50 million perpetual scholarship fund at MIT for underrepresented women and minorities in aerospace engineering, the Elara Sterling Ascension Scholarship." She wasn't finished. "And Aura Airlines. I don't just want the crew fired. I want to meet with their CEO and their board. I want to help them design a new compassion and bias recognition training program from the ground up. A mandatory program for every employee, from the baggage handlers to the pilots. We'll use the data from today. We'll use the videos. We'll build a better system." Marcus was speechless. He looked at the young woman before him, not a bruised and frightened girl, but a visionary. He had raised her to build machines that conquered the sky, and she had decided to re-engineer the world itself. A slow, profound smile spread across his face. It was the proudest moment of his life. "Okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Okay, Lara. We'll build a better system." An hour later, the Gulf Stream sliced through the stratosphere, a silver needle stitching a path through the dark tapestry of the night sky. Below, the lights of America were a glittering schematic of human connection. The cabin was silent, save for the whisper of recycled air and the quiet hum of the Rolls-Royce engines. Marcus sat across from her, watching as her fingers flew across the screen of her tablet. He had made the calls. The meeting with Aura's CEO was set for the following week. His legal team was redrafting the terms of the Covington settlement, shifting from punitive damages to constructive investment. The wheels were in motion. He thought she was finally working on the presentation she had been so focused on before her world had been upended. But when he glanced over, he saw she wasn't looking at gyroscopic schematics or landing gear actuators. She was on the MIT faculty website, drafting an email to the Dean of Engineering, The subject line read, "Proposal for the Sterling Ascension Scholarship Program." She looked up and caught his eye, a small, determined smile on her face. The bruise on her wrist was a dark shadow in the soft cabin light, but it no longer looked like a brand of shame. It looked like a reminder, a catalyst. "Sometimes," Marcus said softly, breaking the silence, "the most elegant designs are born from the most catastrophic failures." Ilara looked out the window at the gentle curve of the earth, a fragile blue line suspended in the infinite black. The world had tried to tell her where her place was. It had tried to put her in a box, then in a cell. It had tried to ground her, but it had failed. She was an engineer. It was her job not just to understand systems, but to improve them. And she was just getting started. She turned back to her tablet, her mind already calculating, designing, building. The presentation for the conference could wait. She had a better one to prepare.